Hello and welcome back to the Football Fan Fanatics Podcast, where Nadine Dereza, my mum, and I will be talking all things football and the World Cup. Thanks to everyone so far from around the world for listening to us. We've had downloads from 58 different countries, including the UK, the US, as well as Germany, the Netherlands, and Turkey. So thanks for the global support. It's much appreciated. We've just completed the last 16 phase of the World Cup, and now we head into the quarterfinals as we record this a day before, knowing 8 teams remain. All co-hosts, Mexico, Canada, and the US, have been knocked out, and we'll be talking about that as well as the games to come. Let's not forget that the United States, for them, it was their heaviest defeat since the 1990, and they were knocked out by Belgium. But it was Balogun's red card that took all the headlines, so we will be discussing that too. We're going to dive straight in, and we're going to start with Mexico v England. Wow, what a game. I'm only 20 years of age, but I have to say, this was my favourite game of football to ever watch for England. Mum, let's start. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if it's my favourite, but it's definitely up there. What an absolute corker of a game. I've watched the match twice now because I just wanted to savour this moment. I've seen so much rubbish football from England over the years that I thought I've got to see this twice. And aside from the second half against Croatia in the group stage, this was one of the best performances I've seen England play for a long while, maybe in the 20 years that you've been on planet Earth, James. And things seemed to click into place, didn't they? And I just love the passion, the trials, the tribulations throughout. It will go down in history as one of the greatest English performances. But even when I was watching it for a second time, I felt so tense still, even though I knew the outcome. And I liken that experience to watching the Apollo 13 film 5 or 6 times over the years. That's the one starring Tom Hanks, if you've seen it. Although I know the ending, I'm still not convinced NASA can return Apollo 13 to Earth safely after the spacecraft undergoes massive internal damage, putting the lives of the 3 astronauts on board in jeopardy. And that's how I felt about the Mexico-England game, even watching it on the second go. And when we had the added drama, didn't we, of FIFA's U-turn on the kickoff time. Would it be brought forward or not, depending on the weather and the likelihood of thunderstorms? And in the end, it was delayed by an hour just to add to the tension and the tiredness. And we'd previously mentioned, hadn't we, James, on this podcast about the altitude at the Azteca Stadium and the impact that would have on their performance, with the stadium 2,240 metres above sea level, and how the England's players would cope with playing at that altitude, considering they haven't had enough time to acclimatise those conditions. And realistically, you need about 10 days to do so, and they just had a couple of days. But I thought England took the sting out of that issue by deliberately calming down the play for, say, the first 15 to 20 minutes, which I only found out recently is the critical time to acclimatise. And after that, things got easier for the players. And I thought Anthony Gordon looked sharper. Jude Bellingham, of course, was made for this occasion. And you know a team needs to hold on for dear life when England bring on a towering presence, 6'7" defender, Dan Burn, in the 75th minute. But he actually played for 28 minutes with 13 minutes of stoppage time, which seemed like an eternity. So well done, Dan, for equalling a 60-year record for the joint most clearances by a player sub-late on in a World Cup. And I'm in no doubt that his hard-fought efforts helped England secure the win. And Harry Kane, losing his voice for the post-match interview, mirrored, I think, how the country was feeling. He threw everything in. What a legend, what a leader he was on the night. I went to see the tennis at Wimbledon on Monday with a big smile on my face, and that was certainly cemented by the fact Arthur Ferry won on centre court too. So a great day all round, if not a long and tiring one. And I know you were working at Silverstone for 4 days, you were camping there, and you stayed up all night to watch it at the campsite in a big screen that they put up in the field. So, you know, what were the highlights for you from the game, James? There must have been loads for you.
Absolutely loads. You mentioned Apollo mission. I think the players would agree that it was an Apollo mission, given how high up they had to go. It would have felt like a space exhibition for them. of the Azteca being 2,500 meters high. So many highlights. You're right. You mentioned a few. You mentioned Dan Burn. I want to start with him. Dan the man. He was exceptional when he came on, and what I really enjoyed about that was prior to the tournament, lots of people were questioning his inclusion in the 26-man squad, but that really showed why Thomas Tuchel included him. It was the perfect scenario for Dan Burn to come on when we were down to 10 men, facing all that pressure from Mexico on their home turf, and he was exceptional. There was one header which went all the way across the halfway line just from a cross. Only Dan Burn can do that. He's a huge lump. He even made Peter Crouch look small next to him on the sidelines after the game.
That's so true.
So yeah, he was flawless. But the other thing that I love was Thomas Tuchel, and just his game management was exceptional. His substitutions, the timings of the substitutions. I think the hydration break certainly helped after we got the red card. Brought ourselves together. We were able to have a clear vision of what we wanted to do, to execute that 5-3-1 with 10 men, 5 at the back. Jed Spence as well, fantastic when he came on. John Stones, amazing. Just there wasn't a single player who I thought didn't play well. Even Jarell Quansah, I know he got sent off. Before that, he was brilliant. And I think he was a little unlucky with the red card. I think it was a red card, but I don't think he intended on the follow through. It was unfortunate. But listen, we got through, and everyone in England is on cloud nine right now after that performance. They're really happy. So listen, I could talk about that game for years to come. I could talk about that game for the rest of my life, but it could all change on Saturday if they let us down. Then suddenly everyone forgets about a one round of 16 game. But in this moment in time, let's just enjoy it. So in terms of that defence, do you think now, there's obviously been questions before about our defence, you know, particularly the fullbacks, even the centre-back pairing not being solidified. Do you think that was an improved defensive display? I mean, we still conceded 2 goals, so there's questions over that.
Yeah. I mean, just going one back, I mean, I thought Pickford had an amazing game. I mean, you talked about Dan Burns' header. His punches out were just phenomenal, and actually I appreciated them more on the second time round. But yeah, I think defensively, in that back 4 or 5 as it came in the end, looks stronger and more cohesive. But that right back position just seems to be cursed, doesn't it? We've seen a revolving door of players, and just when you think you can relax, you've mentioned it already, out popped the red card for Erling Haaland for violent conduct after replay showed he'd slid over the top of the ball. I didn't spot it first time round. I've got the beauty of watching it several times, and he definitely put the studs onto the leg of Gallardo in a dangerous manner. Yes, he didn't mean it, but it was a clear red card. You couldn't argue with that one, but it was like, here we go again, down to 10 men. How on earth are they going to survive this one? But they did. But just a step back, though, do you think Man United's Harry Maguire should have been included in the England squad as an experienced centre-back to provide that defensive backbone right from the start of the tournament, which was so obviously missing in the group stages, aside from that second half in the Croatia match, although it was still a defensive display of weakness throughout even that Croatia game. And, you know, will England miss his calibre if they seriously think they can go all the way? And actually that question came in from a listener to the podcast, from Steve Loughton, who wanted to get your thoughts on this, James. So cheers, Steve, for that one.
I think before I was surprised that he wasn't included. But now, considering the performances of the defensive players that came on, I don't think you can really question it in this moment of time. Certainly after we played DR Congo, I think there were major defensive worries, but that was more with the fullbacks and the fact that Reece James was injured and Jed Spence didn't have the best of games. But in the Mexico games, if we're talking about the centre half specifically, the ones that came on and the ones that played, even Gahey and Konza too, you have to give credit to, they played 90 minutes. They all were incredible. So Harry Maguire can feel hard done by for sure, but I don't think you can really criticise that at this moment of time. Again, let's see what happens when we come up against Norway. Obviously, Erling Haaland. We'll talk about that soon. I'm a bit anxious. I know you call him that Viking, which he is,
Viking
and we'll talk
God.
Viking God exactly. He is a Viking God, and as good as we were, I think he's going to be a completely different caliber. But we'll talk about him soon. But I want to turn our attention to a highly spoken about game, which was the United States v Belgium, but it was marred by Balogun's red card from the previous game against Bosnia, which was controversially overturned by FIFA following a call from Donald Trump himself in the White House because he didn't think it was a foul. Although Infantino, president of FIFA, insisted that there had been an independent review, but the optics really don't look good. And Belgian fans during the game were chanting FIFA Mafia on their way into the stadium and during the game. And in the end, Belgium didn't just win, they dismantled the USA with a huge 4-1 victory. And as I said, the heaviest defeat for the United States since 1990. So, Nadine, Mum, what do you make of Balogun's red card being overturned?
Yeah, outrageous, but not surprised based on, what FIFA have been up to, particularly over the last few years. I think many football fans around the world were willing Belgium on. Suddenly they found their inner Belgium within them, just really to rewrite the injustice of the decision to overturn Balogun's red card. I mean, there's been widespread criticism of this decision to suspend the automatic one-match ban to sort of like a 12-month sort of card hanging over him, which could be instigated again. And that criticism came from UEFA, from Belgium, of course, because they had to change their match plans with very little notice. And there was also criticism from many other head coaches around the world, including England's boss, Thomas Tuchel, who, I'm still a little bit unsure about him as a person, as a character. But actually, what I do like about him is the way he calls things out. He just is quite happy to say what he feels and what he means, as opposed to playing a PR game. But President Donald Trump has no idea what a foul is. He doesn't understand the games of football. So on the one hand, I don't think the USA deserved to progress under those circumstances. So I'm very pleased they lost, because I was really behind them as a team. I thought they'd sort of turned a corner. And then I became sort of quite righteous about the fact, no, this is wrong. And I don't think the country deserved to have the likes of Poch to be their manager. I'm hoping that he had no part to play in trying to overturn this ban, although he did select him, of course. But on the other hand, I've got many friends in America who are reasonable and they're balanced and they feel very embarrassed by the way American politics have tarnished this beautiful game. What it has done, though, is shed a light on the fact that there is no system to review referee decisions at the FIFA World Cup, unlike other leagues and competitions around the world. And that seems a flaw in the system, so I think that's something that needs to be changed. But instead, FIFA offered no reason or explanation for suspending Balogun's ban. It just cited Article 27 of the FIFA Disciplinary Code, which allows FIFA to be fully or partially suspend the implementation of a disciplinary measure. So, I mean, I'd never heard of this article before, but we're all now looking at it. So I think sad day for football, but good that cheats don't always win in the end.
Absolutely. I was listening to Donald Trump talking about football in general, and he was mentioning how great players like Kane, Messi, Ronaldo, even if they commit a foul, you can't take them out of a game. And that just sounds like someone that genuinely has absolutely no idea what football is. So, listen, I think he's better off staying in the White House and
Or maybe
not
not.
coming to the final, but that's not going to happen, unfortunately. Yeah, it was great to see Belgium win. I have to be honest. I know you agree with me on that one, and they put in a really good display as well. 4-1 against hosts is a great result. I do think though that the decision to allow Balogun to play negatively affected the USA because it would have obviously been on their conscience. They would have felt like they had an unfair advantage, the players, the manager. And again, we were speaking before the round of 32 about Pochettino getting pressure from the media about them losing their third group game and how that would potentially distract the players and the manager from what they needed to do. And it's happened again. This is another distraction. It's not what you need in a competitive football tournament. But now moving on from that, let's talk about Paraguay v France. A much different game, only one goal between the two sides, and Mbappe's second half penalty was the difference maker. We both watched that game, 1-0 to France, as I said. And many would argue Paraguay's team conduct on the day tarnished the game and their impressive World Cup run. Funnily enough, though, Nadine, I actually quite enjoyed what Paraguay did, and maybe I sound like a horrible person.
No, you're my son, but I don't know what you're going to say now.
No, it really reminded me of like an Atletico Madrid under Simeone type, where they don't have the quality to beat France naturally, so they're going to have to use those dark arts and those tactics to give themselves a chance. And that, to be honest, I think that was their best opportunity. Maybe kicking out the way they did, purposely trying to injure the French players, wasn't a good look. I don't agree with that. But being dirty, putting in fouls, there's nothing wrong with that. That is a tactic. That's a game. Slowing the game down was what they tried to do. And to be honest, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was a proper throwback. It reminded me of Mourinho at Inter Milan when they beat Barcelona, for example. So I enjoyed it. I think I'm on my own in that one.
Yes, you are. You're no son of mine now. I'm going to excommunicate you. No, I love you, really. Well, I found it really tense. I don't think I saw the game in the same way that you did, though. Great for France reaching the World Cup quarterfinals, but it was overshadowed by Paraguay's antagonistic and I think very cynical approach. It went beyond fouling. I think their tactics were awful. They crossed the line repeatedly with several off-the-ball incidents, including a kick aimed at Mbappe. Get off him. He's an amazing player. He needs to be protected, yet remarkably escaped without a single caution, while the ref managed to find his yellow card on several occasions, in fact, 3 times, to book players from France. So he knew where his yellow card was, but didn't have the foresight to bring it out against Paraguay. He needed eyes in the back of his head, which he doesn't have, but there are replays. He could have potentially got assistance, but he just seemed to be myopic to what Paraguay were doing. And I think the turning point came when a foul on substitute Doué, who I know you really like, was reviewed and upgraded to a penalty. And even then, this is what really upset me. Paraguay's players tried to delay that by surrounding the ref and scuffing the penalty spot. I saw it, the ref didn't, but Mbappe converted it, which meant France advanced to the competition to face Morocco in the last 8. I know you're a fully qualified ref, James, and I think you're brilliant because you're balanced, and also you really set the tone beautifully. Again, I'm probably biased because I'm your mum, but I know, if I wasn't related to you, I'd feel the same way. And I always try to be balanced when reviewing a ref's performance, but on this occasion, I think the ref's overall control of the game was too lenient. I don't think he got on top of the match, and he allowed the physical, ill-tempered play, and that's what it was, to go largely unchecked. And he's probably and possibly the worst referee of the tournament so far. I really hope he doesn't officiate another match at the World Cup, and I do hope Paraguay get fined or get some sort of punishment for their ill-disciplined behaviour. I don't applaud it at all. But just moving on now to a happier subject. Michael Olise, who I love. I had him in my top 11 of all players at this World Cup. Remember, it was a question you asked me.
Yes.
I think it was the last episode. And at an international level, interestingly, Olise was eligible to represent England, France, Nigeria, Algeria and Haiti because he has a Nigerian British father, I think I've got that right, and a French Algerian mother, so lovely mixed heritage. But in the end, he chose to play for France. Another fact that I found out recently, he was born in White City in London. So West London, a stone's throw away from the hallowed turf of Loftus Road, London. I can't believe I can't pronounce my own team's stadium. And can you imagine what impact he would have had if he'd decided to play for England? We can only dream. So James, do you feel the same way about this Bayern Munich midfielder as I do? Is Elise the star of the French show, aside from Mbappe, of course? And I'm going to throw in as well, are the French still favourites to win the tournament outright?
Wow, a lot of questions there, and
Sorry.
probably a lot of yeses to that. Let's start with Elise. Amazing. He might not be the main French goal scorer. Obviously, Mbappe's there. Dembele scored a hat-trick against Norway in the group stages, but his understanding of the game, his intelligence, his unselfishness is something for all to admire. He's exceptional. He's a breath of fresh air. And what I actually loved about that Paraguay game is Elise is normally a very relaxed, controlled guy who's just focusing on his football game. But even he was getting frustrated by the Paraguay players. And at that point, you realised, okay, they've gone a bit far here. But I think we can talk about Mbappe all we want, but I think Elise is just as important. I think the two of them, Dembele as well, of course, they're fantastic. And I do think France are still the favourites by a fair margin because of that. I still think their midfield isn't as strong as England's, for example. But as the tournament progresses, I can only see that getting stronger, players getting to know each other more. So yeah, France are the favourites for me. They've obviously got a tough Morocco team. And although they did beat them 2-0 in Qatar in the last World Cup in the semi-finals, I think this game will be tougher. I think Morocco have developed as a team and become even stronger and gain that experience from that World Cup. So I think it'll be a closer game, but I still think France have enough quality. Another game I want to talk about now is Brazil against Norway. I mean, I don't think many people saw this coming. Although I think both of us did. Brazil was still the favourites, but wow, Norway, one of the stories of the World Cup, huh?
Mm-hmm.
They've been fantastic. Prior to this match, Brazil had faced Norway 4 times in history. They'd never won. So the stats up until this week's were 2 draws, 2 losses for Brazil. But now we can update that history, can't we? Because it's now 2 draws, 3 losses. Another painful exit for Neymar, for Brazil. But before we mention the sadness of Brazil, let's talk about Erling Haaland. Another 2 goals for him. He's firmly in the debate for the Golden Boot now at this World Cup. A header and then an outstanding finish from outside of the box. Interestingly, people were talking about his matchup with Gabriel and their fierce rivalry they have at Man City and Arsenal. But Haaland won, didn't he, Mum?
Yep, he certainly did, yeah. And actually, it wasn't much of a match-up, really, wasn't it? Because you saw Gabriel floundering against Haaland, and he was caught flat-footed as Haaland broke the deadlock with that towering head, as you've alluded to already. But yeah, Haaland definitely won that match-up.
And did you think Ancelotti's Brazil were underwhelming? Do you think it was on him or the players? What do you think the significance of that result is for Brazil? Do you think they need a big shake-up in terms of the managerial perspective, or is it something else?
Well, again, you've asked me a couple of questions there. You're, yes, copying my dreadful style. Just going back to, you said underwhelming. I think that's a very fair statement. I mean, Brazil went into the 2026 World Cup missing key attacking players, and during the tournament picked up some injuries too. So Ancelotti, in fairness to him, and he's a cool, calm customer, isn't he? I mean, he was suited and booted. I was thinking, it's hot in these stadiums. I know some of them are air conditioned, but he still looked so smart, and I couldn't see a sweat bead sort of falling off him. But he was working with a depleted squad from the start. And this was Norway's first World Cup appearance in 28 years. And the win over Brazil is the biggest result in the country's footballing history. It's only their third ever World Cup round of 16 appearance after 1938 and 1998. And this Haaland-Odegaard generation finally delivered on sport's biggest stage. But going back to Brazil, to the question you asked about what's the significance of it, well, obviously, again, they've underperformed for Brazil. They're just waiting for their team to sort of kickstart the glory days of years past, and it didn't happen this time round again. But interestingly, Brazil's Football Confederation say it will stick with Ancelotti through to 2030, despite the exit. And Ancelotti, I've been listening to some of his sort of post-match interviews. He framed the defeat as the beginning of a new adventure. Well, again, he does like to do positive spins on things rather than a failure. And he pointed to the injuries and squad turnover he was managing in his first year in the job. But I think underwhelming is a fair sentiment. And, if they don't get things together by 2030, we still can't talk about Brazil as being a great footballing nation anymore. That's my thoughts.
Certainly, I have to agree with you. And we saw that in their first game against Morocco, didn't we?
Yeah.
Morocco obviously led that game early, but a tale of two different sides, really, because Morocco, when they came up against Canada, were fantastic, won the game 3-0, a couple of late goals, but they did face a bit of adversity in the first half. Canada were on top, but they got through that game. And I mentioned Ayoub Badi in the last episode prior to the round of 32 and the impact he had made as just an 18-year-old. And although he didn't play full 90 minutes against Canada, he played about 2/3 of the game. He was fantastic again. I just want to read out a few statistics I found from that game. He won 100% of his aerial duels, 100% of his tackles, 100% successful take-ons, 88% passing accuracy, 2 fouls won, 12 carries, 67% ground duels won. I mean, wow, the sky's the limit for this young lad. He's attracting major interest from big, ginormous clubs. And again, the more I watch him, the more impressed I am and the more I can't take my eyes off the screen. So, Nadine, I know you watched that one as well. It is sad when the host goes out. We talked about the buzz that you get when all the hosts are doing well. And although they all made it to the round of 16, they were all knocked out. So do you think this was Canada's limit, or are they going to go look back on it kicking themselves in a way?
I do think it was their limit. They reached it because they don't have a squad of world-class players, of superstar strikers. I thought Morocco would come out of the traps and dominate from the off, but Canada's early game plan I thought was excellent and surprised me. And they didn't make, though, the most of their chances. They lacked that final finishing touch. But as the match progressed through to the second half, Morocco regained their form somewhat. I don't think Morocco was a dazzling display this time. It was very laid back. And actually, I was watching the match with two of my friends, Paul and Val, who are fellow QPR season ticket holders in a pub in London. The thing that we were all astounded by was the number of yellow cards dished out by referee Michael Oliver, who plies his trade in the English Premier League. And he seemed to be very card happy. In the first half, there were more cards than shots, with 6 cards handed out, and only 5 shots between both teams. And that's the first time since 1966 that the first half of a FIFA World Cup match has had that many cards, which I think is a very telling stat in itself and speaks volumes about the officiating on display. There were 8 yellow cards in total. So the second half, yes, was slightly calmer. But I'm really surprised because Michael Oliver is one of the most highly regarded refs in the Premier League, and it brings up the questions of consistency of refereeing in the games in the last 16. So to me, that was, one of the main features of the game. And realistically, I think most of the cards were fair, but there was one, I think, in the second half where he must have been sort of hypnotised because he was ready to dish out the yellow card and it just didn't look like a foul. So that was my overriding impression of the game. Lack of consistency amongst other refereeing decisions.
Absolutely. We've already mentioned Paraguay and how they didn't receive a single card. So consistency is so important. And you're having one referee that's giving 6.5 cards and another that's not giving any at all brings into question how fair is it on certain sides and nations, and it needs to be consistent. And it's the exact same with the Balogun decision. We're now seeing lots of nations request appeals. João Kwanzaa's red card. It's just terrible, the precedent that this has started now. And again, after this World Cup, there's going to need to be a big review into FIFA, the way they handle things, not just the football side of things, but off the pitch as well, with, for example, the way Iran were treated during the World Cup. And we'll leave that to one side for now. That's definitely something we can talk about when the World Cup's finished, because we do want to focus on the football, which has been fantastic, and there's so much to talk about. I also want to bring out Argentina v Egypt, because wow, some game, Egypt 2-0 up, thinking this is going to be the biggest result ever for that national team. They were so close, just 12 minutes left, Mum, and they bottled it, didn't they?
Yeah. Interesting though, because obviously Egypt thinks there's been an injustice, and I do have a certain amount of sympathy for them, because VAR chalked off what would have been a second goal for Egypt. I know they went on to score 2 goals, but it could have been 3. But yeah, VAR chalked off what would have been a second goal for Egypt for a marginal foul in the build-up. And they then felt Mo Salah was fouled in the box just before Argentina broke for the winner. And the Egyptian coach, Hassan, didn't hold back afterwards, saying his team had been treated unfairly and suffered an injustice, and felt there'd been a bias towards Messi. I mean, FIFA has yet to respond to that. I mean, they may have done today. I haven't seen anything thus far. But again, ultimately, I think it points more to a lack of consistency in the referees' decision-making on the day. Are we going to talk about the Spanish match as well?
I was just going to say I missed out Portugal versus Spain, probably because it was a bit of a drab game. So it didn't come to my mind. It was a late 1-0 win for Spain. A real shame, actually, in terms of the watchability of it, because prior to that, when you were looking at the list of round of 16 games, that probably stood out as two big balls clashing together, but it didn't quite deliver. And the big talking point really was Roberto Martinez's decision to keep Ronaldo on. It's almost a sign that a player in this occasion was bigger than the nation, which they never should be, no matter what pedigree they hold.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something to talk about in terms of Portugal. Let's start with Spain though, because Ferran Torres set up the late winner in a tense, cagey tie, and they do look good defensively, don't they, Nadine?
Yeah, I mean, they do. Unbeaten in 5 matches and into the quarterfinals, Spain, for the first time since they won the World Cup in 2010. I mean, that said, the performances haven't been totally convincing. I mean, for the Portugal win, Spain were the better team overall, but didn't show an elite level of play. I don't know if you agree with me, with Pedri not quite at his best and Rodri struggling to impose his usual tempo. That's how I read the game. So the results are there, but the midfield engine, I don't think, is purring the same way it did during their Euro 2024 win. And I still think France have the overall edge on Spain, because, Spain and France were sort of possibly vying to win that competition overall. And I think France look better than Spain. I mean, have I read the game rightly? Is that how you saw it?
I saw it the exact same way. I really did. I think the Spain of 2024 would have dominated that Portuguese team, and they didn't quite have that same ferocity in their midfield as we'd like to see. They have the players to do it, but they're not just quite there at the moment. Pedri, as you mentioned, was subbed off early, didn't make the impact that he wanted to. So, yeah, Spain, I think, will be a little underwhelmed as well so far by how they've been certainly going forward. Defensively, they've been really, really good. They seem to have developed a strong back four. When we talk about Porro, for example, Spurs fullback, who was questioned in the Premier League, but he's been really good. Cucurella on the other side, no one doubts him. He's fantastic. And then Kibasi and Laporte too seem like a really, really well-established centre-back partnership, probably the strongest partnership of the World Cup so far. So do you see Spain getting past France? I mean, you've kind of already answered that question, haven't you?
No, not at this stage, but you never know. I remember Portugal when they won the Euros. I know we're not talking about the Euros now, and they had a really poor start and just managed to snatch victory. I can't remember what year that was now. So, and again, England, based on their sort of group stages, you wouldn't predict them to win the World Cup. But if you were to base it on their last performance against Mexico, you think, hang on a minute, they could potentially do it. So I wouldn't rule them out because, all it takes is to be good during the final, and you don't necessarily have to be great in previous matches. You could save your best to last, and that will get you past the finishing line. But I still see France, Didier Deschamps, is just such a master plan game player, isn't he? And that would be an amazing swan song for him before he retires from French football. So I think all the ingredients point France's way.
Well, we've got one more clash from the round of 16 that we haven't spoken about yet. Switzerland versus Colombia. A goalless draw in 120 minutes, so it went to penalties, and unfortunately for Colombia, it was heartbreak, losing 4-3 on penalties, missing two. It was a real shame because I did say they were my dark horses as well in our last episode, so I was secretly hoping they'd progress. I also thought as well Argentina v Colombia in the next round would be a much spicier game than that of Switzerland. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, that Switzerland Argentina game. Do you see that being Messi's last dance?
Potentially. I know we're going to look ahead to the quarterfinals. Who knows? I mean, Messi potentially, can turn games around as we saw the other day. But actually, I think for Switzerland, just pinpointing that Switzerland-Colombia game very briefly, the Swiss proved they could hold their nerve. They could convert when it mattered most. And Colombia up into the stage, I thought looked really, really impressive. I've seen Colombia play in tournaments live when I've been to games throughout the years. Before I had you, I used to see a lot more football than I do these days. I've seen more in the last 10 years as you've got older. But I thought Switzerland is a landmark run for them. And this has marked their first World Cup quarter-final appearance since 1954. So, I don't know, that Switzerland were my dark horses alongside Norway. I think in one of the first couple of episodes that we recorded. So well done to Switzerland.
Yeah, well, let's move on, as you said, to the last eight. We've already mentioned France and Morocco, so we'll leave that there for now. Let's turn our attention to Spain against Belgium to commence in the Los Angeles Stadium. Spain, they obviously they face Belgium, and it's a rematch 4 decades on from their famous 1986 World Cup meeting. It's their third World Cup encounter overall, and this time a semi-final date against the France or Morocco winner is the prize. Belgium's path here has been anything but calm, I'd say. They looked finished against Senegal in the round of 32. They were trailing 2-0 before they managed to stunningly claw their way back and win 3-2 in extra time. But the round of 16 looked much more compelling for them, winning 4-1 in Seattle against the host United States. But for me, I think this is where Belgium's run ends. They haven't faced the quality of opposition like Spain, and they've already looked weak in previous games against the likes of Egypt, who they couldn't even beat. So, yeah, do you agree with me on that one, Nadine? Do you think Belgium are done now that they've got Spain?
Yeah, I think on paper, yes, because Spain has been a fortress, unbeaten and yet to concede all tournament, although still not firing on all cylinders. And compare and contrast that to Belgium, it's all been about fireworks, chaos, comebacks, scoring and conceding goals throughout the tournament. So I see that as a Spanish win.
Yeah, and in terms of this game, I know Lamine Yamal's not really made much of an impact as he would like. He's obviously coming back from an injury, but I think this could be the game where he sparks into life. Belgium have had a few defensive issues, and De Koypier on the Belgium left-hand side, who Yamal would supposedly be up against, likes to go forward a lot. So unless Belgium change their tactics, which they probably do need to do, they don't need to be so aggressive with their fullbacks. But if they do play like they have done, I think Lamine Yamal can certainly exploit that, and I hope he does, because everyone's waiting. They're watching and waiting for him to light up the game, which we all know he can.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll do that this time?
I hope so, because I'm a big fan of him. And I've told you before, I've seen him live in person in Barcelona, and that was just such a thrill. But who else do you think we should look out for on the pitch for this match, James?
The other one that interests me is Lukaku for Belgium, just because he's always got something to prove, and he did score against the United States. So yeah, but he's always sort of got a chip on his shoulder in a way. There's always people questioning how good he is for Belgium, questioning his size, his physicality. Is he athletic? Is he fit enough?
I mean, he
And
seems to
obviously,
be, sorry, an Evertonian. I was about to say,
as an Evertonian, I always root for him, and it upsets me a little bit when he's playing for Belgium, because he always seems to miss big chances, disappoint. But I think we should keep an eye out for him. The other one I'm interested in is Dani Olmo too. He plays in that 10 position for Spain. Another one where you'd say he hasn't quite got going, but when he does get going, he's really, really positive and influential, and he's amazing during the Euros watching him. So that's going to intrigue me. Now, let's move on to Norway against England. This is the big one in Miami in the roaring heat. Looks roughly about 33, 34 degrees at this moment in time.
no air conditioning in that stadium. I forget which ones do.
I'm not sure. I don't think air conditioning is going to stop the players from struggling with the heat. Although interestingly, I think many people are suggesting that Norway was the best outcome for England given the cold temperatures that they're used to, whereas Brazil would have probably been more well adjusted to this heat. But these two sides have never met in a World Cup tournament before. Norway have obviously, as I mentioned, have been fantastic. They've been an incredible story of the World Cup. Led and powered by Erling Haaland, they stunned Brazil 2-1 in the round of 16 to reach the last 8 already, which is their best World Cup run in their history. But England is a completely different task for them. Tommy T, his side, or Thomas Tuchel, should I say? A lot of people are calling him Tommy T. But his side survived a scare against DR Congo, only winning 2-1, but that was obviously a late turnaround before just edging Mexico 3-2 in a thriller at the Azteca, which we've mentioned. Do you think we'll get another thriller here, or do you think it'll be more cagey?
Oh, I hope so. This is shaping up to be one of the quarterfinals to watch. Haaland and Martin Odegaard for Norway going head to head with Jude Bellingham and Harry Kane for England. So two attacking juggernauts in the shape of Haaland and Kane, and two midfielders built to control the game in the form of Odegaard and Jude Bellingham. I mean, what a matchup. This one has everything you could wish for in a game. I just hope it lives up to the hype. I mean, because we're all hyped up now after the Mexico game and for the Norwegians against Brazil. Interestingly, my brother Nick, though, will have a divided household for this quarterfinal match because he has a Norwegian forest cat, which I've only just heard about, called Camus, which is not a Norwegian name, of course. That's Nick is very well read, as we can imagine, based around the name of his cat. But anyway, Camus seems to be listening and responding to the call of his ancestors when they're watching the games on TV. And the cat Camus perked up when Haaland was banging the drum while the rest of the team and fans in the stadium were rowing, which is part of their celebrations if you haven't seen it before. It's a must-watch. And these Norwegian forest cats in the past would travel with the Vikings as ratters on the long boat. So clearly Camus is supporting Norway. So who's going to be happier, Nick or Camus? So how do you see this game panning out, James?
I see England winning.
Ooh.
And maybe that's just me riding on the fact that the Mexico game was the best game I've ever seen. But no, I just think Norway will be happy either way. Obviously, they'll want to win. I'm not going to say that they won't mind losing, but it's been a fantastic tournament for Norway. And I just think England will find this one easier in terms of they've just been 2,000 meters high, more than that. And going back down to Miami, I actually think in some ways that's good climate training for England. But I also just think in terms of our midfield, our quality will be too much for them. Haaland will be incredibly tough to deal with. I'm not going to question that. You can't really question the Viking King, as you love to call him.
God.
Viking God, sorry, God King. You got there's endless things you could call him. But yeah, I think we'll edge the game. I think we'll edge the game 2-1. What's your prediction?
Oh, I said I didn't want to do any more score predictions. I always get this wrong. Can I have the same as you, 2-1?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely see both sides scoring. I just really hope we step on now and put in another statement performance rather than sort of the performances we're putting in the group stages. I just hope we play with that calmness, but at the same time a bit of fearlessness when we need to and when we need to go forward. But let's talk about another fearless team, Argentina. They take on Switzerland at Kansas City Stadium, US. We have just talked about them briefly. And it's their third ever World Cup meeting between the two sides. Argentina have won both previous ties back in 1966 and 2014. Switzerland, you'd say, a surprise package of this tournament. I know you had them as a dark horses, so well done, Nadine, because you're one of the only ones that had them. I'm pretty sure as dark horses. I didn't really see many shouts for Switzerland, so well done to you.
Thank you.
But they've reached their first quarter final since 1954, beating Algeria before edging past Colombia on penalties. But of course, Lionel Messi, he's the main man. He's Scaloni's man, isn't he? And all eyes are on him. What I love is when Argentina go out the tunnel before they warm up and all the players are surrounding Messi like his own security team. So this is it, this World Cup. It feels like his last shot at glory. We just had Neymar and Ronaldo knocked out, and that's you'd like to think, although we never know Ronaldo, you'd like to think that's their last World Cup, but this could be the last shot of glory for Messi. Do you think this game is the end to that, or do you think he'll get past it again?
I think this game has upset written all over it. Argentina has the pedigree, the trophy, and Messi. But look at how they got there. Extra time against Cape Verde, a 2-goal collapse against Egypt that they somehow clawed back and won that 3-2. That's not a team cruising. That's a team that keeps finding themselves in trouble. It's fine if that was a one-off, but this seems to be repeat patterns. Switzerland, on the other hand, look calm. There's no fireworks, no dramatics, just efficient, disciplined football. That clean sheet against Algeria, ice cold on penalties against Colombia. That's the profile of the team that doesn't fear the occasion. If Argentina's defence has another wobble, I think Switzerland have shown all tournament they'll punish it. I wouldn't be shocked if this is the game that finally ends the Messi fairy tale. Do you agree, James?
It's really tricky. You put me on the spot here. I'm just going to have to say with my heart, because I love Lionel Messi, that I think he'll get them through this again. It's another case of, we mentioned how Switzerland haven't been in a World Cup quarterfinal since 1954. So I feel like there is more pressure on Argentina because either way, it's a successful tournament for Switzerland. But they just seem to have that mentality of coming back in games and thinking, we got to do this for Messi. We can't let him down. And of course, he's been incredible. Again, he might be older, but that talent that he has will never fade away. Obviously, he missed a penalty. I know that, but he scored a great goal. set up a goal too. And I just think Argentina will have enough quality to beat Switzerland. And it might take another comeback. It might take them to step up in the last 15 minutes. But I just think the quality and the ferociousness of them as a nation will be enough. And also when I look at the stadiums, they always bring thousands and thousands of supporters to games. They always outnumber the opposition. So yeah, that's going to be really intriguing. I'm so excited for the quarterfinals. It feels like we're getting to the big part of the tournament now. But thank you, Nadine. Thank you to everyone for listening to this week's Football Fan Fanatics podcast. To make sure all our episodes drop right into your feed, you can follow our show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen online, because we're available on all the major and minor podcast platforms. To find out more about us, please visit our website, footballfanfanatics.com. And you can watch us on our Football Fan Fanatics YouTube channel too. In a few weeks' time, we'll start having guest contributors on our show, and we've already lined up Nigel Adderley, football commentator with TalkSport, Ryan Herman, author of the soon-to-be-released iconic Football Grounds, and a couple of football players too, who we're deliberately keeping under wraps at the moment. If you're connected with football and you'd like to appear on the show, please get in contact. Details are on the website. Thank you again. See you next time.